Birthdays are supposed to be about celebration, laughter, and happiness. But for me, they became a reminder of fear, obsession, and the man who wouldn't let me go. It started when I was 19. Back then, I was young, carefree, and like most people my age, I spent way too much time on the internet. Social media, forums, music-sharing sites, I loved connecting with new people. That's how I met Alan. We bonded over music. He had great taste, old school rock, underground indie bands, the kind of stuff that made me think he was cool and different. He was funny, charming in a slightly awkward way, and best of all, he actually listened. When we talked, he made me feel interesting, like my opinions actually mattered. At the time, I had no reason to be suspicious. He seemed like a normal guy. So when my best friend, Chloe, invited me to her birthday party, and Alan casually mentioned he'd love to meet me in person someday, I figured, why not? I invited him. That was my first mistake. The party was small, just close friends hanging out at Chloe's house, drinking cheap wine and singing badly to old songs. When Alan arrived, he seemed nervous but polite. He brought Chloe a bottle of wine as a birthday gift, which I thought was sweet. For the first few hours, everything was fine. He laughed at our terrible karaoke, listened to Chloe's dramatic retelling of her last breakup, and even helped clean up when someone spilled their drink. But at some point, I noticed something weird. Alan wasn't mingling. He wasn't talking to anyone but me. No matter where I moved in the house, he followed. If I sat down, he sat next to me. If I got up to grab a drink, he was suddenly beside me. It was subtle at first, but after a while, even Chloe noticed. At one point, she leaned in and whispered, "Your boy is glued to your side. Everything okay?" I laughed it off, but my stomach was starting to tighten. Then, when I went to the bathroom, I caught him standing outside the door. Just waiting. I froze. Hey," I said awkwardly. Alan smiled. "I just didn't want you to get lonely." I laughed nervously. "Pretty sure I'll survive a trip to the bathroom." He chuckled but didn't move. A weird feeling itched at the back of my mind, but I pushed it away. Maybe he was just socially awkward. Maybe he just didn't know how to act at parties. I should have trusted my gut. After the party, Alan started messaging me constantly. At first, it was cute, little check-ins, funny memes, good morning texts. But soon, it became overwhelming. If I didn't reply within minutes, he'd send more messages. If I took too long, he'd ask if I was mad at him. Then came the phone calls. If I ignored them, he'd call again and again. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to see I had 26 missed calls from Alan. I sat up in bed, heart racing. What the hell? I hesitated before calling him back. The second he answered, he sounded relieved. "Thank God," he breathed. "I thought something happened to you." I blinked. "Alan, it's the middle of the night." "I know," he said, "but I had a bad feeling. I needed to make sure you were safe." I didn't know how to respond. This wasn't romantic. It was obsessive. I knew then that I had to cut him off. I tried to be gentle. I told him I wasn't looking for anything serious, that we should take a break, that I needed space. Alan didn't take it well. He showed up at my house the next day. I opened the door, shocked. "Alan, what are you doing here?" His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. "I need to talk to you." I hesitated. "Alan, I just told you." "Please." His voice cracked. "Just 5 minutes. Then I'll leave." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside. The moment the door shut behind me, he grabbed my hands. "I love you," he said, eyes wide. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I love you." I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. "Alan," I pulled my hands away. "You don't love me. We barely know each other." His face twisted. "Don't say that." I took a step back. "I need you to go." He didn't move. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Leave. Now." Something flickered in his eyes, something dark. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. For the next few weeks, I thought it was over. Then he started showing up again. I'd be walking home from class and see him standing at the corner, watching. I'd look out my bedroom window at night and see his car parked down the street. He never approached me again, but he made sure I knew he was there. I stopped sleeping. I stopped leaving my house alone. I checked over my shoulder constantly. Finally, I told my parents. My dad confronted him, warning him to stay away. Alan disappeared after that. For a while, I thought I was finally free. But then, on my 24th birthday, I received a package. It was wrapped beautifully with an elegant black ribbon. No return address. My stomach twisted as I opened it. Inside was a bouquet of red roses. And a single note. Happy birthday, my love. I always know where you are. I felt like I was going to throw up. Alan had found me. Even after 5 years, a new city, a new life, he still knew where I was. I called the police, but there was nothing they could do. He hadn't threatened me. He hadn't broken any laws. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at my locked bedroom door, waiting for a knock that never came. I never saw Alan again, but every year, on my birthday, I get a package. Always unmarked. Always the same. A bouquet of red roses. A single note. Happy birthday, my love. And I know, wherever he is, he's still watching. I was 8 years old when I first met Tiny. She wasn't really tiny. Her real name was Natalia, but everyone called her Tiny because she was small for her age. Despite her size, she had a big personality, loud, fearless, the kind of kid who never backed down from an argument, even with the older kids. I liked her instantly. We became friends the way kids do, without thinking too much about it. One day she sat next to me at lunch, traded half her sandwich for my cookies, and that was that. But Tiny wasn't like the rest of us. She lived differently. We came from a neighborhood where people barely scraped by. Most of our parents worked too, sometimes 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Our streets had potholes the size of craters, and half the houses had boards over their windows. Tiny's house wasn't like that. It was huge, 2 stories, with a high brick wall surrounding it and an iron gate that buzzed when you pushed the intercom. The backyard had a swimming pool, and inside, the floors were shiny like the ones at a hotel. She had new toys every week, the kind that the rest of us only saw in store windows. And her mom? She always wore gold jewelry, big rings with shiny stones, even when she was just picking Tiny up from school. At 8 years old, I thought Tiny's family was just rich. I didn't know that wealth like that had a price. When Tiny handed me the birthday invitation, I was thrilled. It wasn't some cheap party store card. It was fancy, printed on thick, glossy paper with gold lettering. You're coming, right? Tiny asked, grinning. Of course, I said. This is going to be awesome. I ran all the way home, waving the invitation in my mom's face the second I walked through the door. Her expression changed immediately. She didn't smile. She didn't ask what kind of cake Tiny was having or what present I wanted to bring. She just stared at the invitation like it was something dangerous. You're not going, she said, snatching it out of my hands. I froze. What? Why? She hesitated, gripping the card too tightly. Then she sighed. Tiny's family isn't safe. I didn't understand. They live in a big house, I argued. They have a pool. Her mom makes lemonade from real lemons. My mom shook her head. That house was built on bad money, she said. At 8 years old, that didn't make sense to me. I begged her to let me go. I told her I'd be careful, that I'd stick with Tiny the whole time. She wouldn't budge. And that was the end of it. I didn't go to Tiny's party. That night, while I was sulking in my room, I heard the gunshots. Gunshots weren't uncommon in our neighborhood. Sometimes they were warnings, sometimes they were celebrations, and sometimes they were just people firing into the air for no reason. But this was different. It wasn't 1 shot or 2. It was a whole damn war zone. A rapid, endless pop, 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 mixed with screaming, the sound of tires screeching against pavement, and then silence. I ran to my window, heart pounding. In the distance, I saw flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the dark sky. Then my mom grabbed me, yanking me away from the window so hard I almost fell. She crouched down, gripping my arms, her eyes wild. Stay away from that family. Do you understand me? I nodded, too scared to argue. The next day, I learned the truth. Tiny's dad wasn't just rich. He was a drug lord. The details spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Tiny's father had been playing both sides, pretending to be loyal to his cartel while secretly working with law enforcement. That night, his enemies found out. The hit wasn't just on him. It was on his entire family. His body was found in the driveway, riddled with bullets. Several of his men were dead. The house was torn apart, windows shattered, blood staining the expensive marble floors. And Tiny? Tiny and her entire family vanished. No funeral. No goodbyes. Just gone. The house sat empty, left to rot behind that towering metal gate. No one dared go near it. Not even the neighborhood kids, who usually broke into abandoned houses for fun. It was like the whole family had been erased. For years, I wondered what happened to Tiny. Then, when I was 19, I found out. It was late at night, and I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw it. A news article. Cartel heir found murdered in Texas. At first, I wasn't going to click on it. Just another crime story. But then, a name jumped out at me. Tiny's older brother. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. He had been shot execution style in the back of the head. Authorities suspected it was a revenge hit, carried out by people who still had unfinished business with his father. And if they had found him? What about Tiny? I searched everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, old news articles. Nothing. It was like she had never existed. Finally, after weeks of digging, I found a tiny mention in a forum thread. A single comment from an anonymous user. The whole family was moved. Witness protection. New names, new lives. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Tiny, Natalia, was alive. Somewhere out there, she had a new name, a new identity. And if she was smart, she never spoke about her past. Never told anyone who she really was. Never celebrated another birthday. Because in her world, birthdays weren't about cake and presents. They were about who lived and who didn't. Some childhood memories fade with time. Others stay buried, hidden beneath layers of nostalgia, only surfacing in fragments, pieces of laughter, moments of joy, little details that don't seem important until years later. But then there are the memories that never fade. The ones that stay sharp, clear, and terrifying. I was 9 years old when I learned that monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they smile at you, and sometimes they try to hold you underwater until you stop breathing. Dylan's birthday party was supposed to be the best day of the summer. I barely knew him. We were in the same class, but we weren't exactly friends. Still, when he handed out birthday invitations to every single kid, I wasn't about to turn it down, especially when I saw the location. It was at a country club pool. To a 9-year-old, that sounded like a whole different world. Most of us were lucky if we had a backyard sprinkler or a cheap kiddie pool from the dollar store. But Dylan's party? It had everything: an enormous pool, a lazy river, a twisting water slide, and even a section of the deep end that only the older kids could go near. I remember standing by the fence, clutching my birthday gift in my hands, bouncing with excitement as my mom signed me in. The air smelled like chlorine and sunscreen, and the sound of splashing water and laughter filled the air. It was perfect. Or at least, I thought it was. The first hour was a dream. I stuck with a few kids I knew from school, playing Marco Polo, racing each other in the shallow end, diving for the colorful plastic rings that the lifeguard tossed in. Parents sat on lounge chairs, sipping sodas, chatting, keeping a loose eye on us. Then Lily found me. I barely knew her. She was one of those kids who was always just there, quiet, polite, never really standing out. She always had her hair in a neat braid, and she spoke in a voice that was too soft, too careful. At school, I had never paid much attention to her. But that day, at the party, she wouldn't leave me alone. She kept watching me, following me from one end of the pool to the other. At first, I thought she just wanted to play with us. Then she leaned in, her wet braid sticking to her shoulder, and whispered, "I bet I can hold my breath longer than you." I blinked. Huh. Her smile was too wide. "Let's have a contest," she said. I was competitive, even at 9. A simple breath-holding contest didn't seem weird at all. So I shrugged. Okay. We took deep breaths, counted to 3, and went under. The second I went underwater, Lily grabbed me. Not playfully. Not like a normal kid messing around. Her hands clamped onto my shoulders, forcing me down. At first, I thought she was just trying to win. Then she pushed harder. I thrashed, my feet slipping against the pool floor, bubbles escaping from my mouth as I tried to twist away. She didn't let go. The game was over, but she wasn't stopping. She was holding me down. Panic flooded my body. My lungs were already burning, screaming for air. I kicked, trying to push myself up, but she was stronger than she looked. I clawed at her arms, but her fingers dug into my skin. Above me, the surface of the water shimmered, distorted by the sun, so close, but completely unreachable. I could hear the muffled sounds of kids laughing, splashing, parents talking, completely unaware that I was drowning right in front of them. I needed air. I needed air. My vision blurred. My chest convulsed, desperate for oxygen, and for a moment, just a second, I almost breathed in. Then, suddenly, she let go. I shot up, breaking the surface, gasping so hard it felt like my lungs were collapsing. I coughed violently, choking, the world spinning as I struggled to stay afloat. When I finally forced myself to look at her, she was smiling. Not a playful smile. not an embarrassed, oops, I went too far smile. It was cold. It was knowing. It was the kind of smile that haunted me for years. I stumbled out of the pool, my whole body shaking. Nobody noticed. Nobody had seen what happened. The kids were still playing. The parents were still talking, and Lily? She just floated there, staring at me. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. I stared at her. "You," I coughed, still trying to catch my breath. "You held me down." She shrugged. "It was just a game." A chill ran down my spine. She meant it. She really thought it was a game. For the rest of the party, I avoided her. I stayed near the food table, near the parents, anywhere but the pool. But every time I glanced back, she was watching me. Always watching me. Years passed. I moved on. But sometimes, when I was in the shower and let the water run over my face for too long, I felt that same panicked, helpless feeling. I thought I had buried that day. Until, when I was 18, I saw her name again. It was in a news article. My stomach dropped. Local woman arrested for murder. I stared at the screen. It was Lily. She had been arrested for torturing and killing a child. The details were horrific, too much for me to process. But one thing stood out. She drowned them. I sat there, my hands shaking, the room spinning around me. I thought back to that day at the pool. The way she held me down. The way she smiled afterward. Had she been practicing? Had I almost been her first victim? I'll never know. But sometimes, when I close my eyes and let the water rush over my face, I can still feel her hands on my shoulders. Still hear her voice, soft and sweet. It was just a game. It all started with a birthday photo. A single, harmless post on social media. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, I wish I had never taken that picture. I wish I had never let my friend post it. Because that one small decision, one click, one moment of carelessness, nearly changed my life forever. And not in a good way. It was my 22nd birthday. Nothing extravagant, just a small dinner with friends at my favorite restaurant, a few drinks, and some bad karaoke afterward. It was the kind of birthday I had always loved. Low-key, comfortable, filled with the people I trusted most. One of my friends, Sam, had recently gotten into photography. She brought her fancy camera and spent half the night snapping pictures, capturing moments of laughter, raised glasses, and cake smeared across my cheek when someone pushed my face into the frosting. At the end of the night, she posted a few of the best shots to Instagram. "Happy birthday to this beautiful soul. Party Popper Sparkling Heart 22 looks good on you." I barely thought about it. Just another post in a sea of birthday wishes. I had no idea that someone was watching. The message came the next morning. I was half asleep, scrolling through notifications, when I saw it. A DM from an account I didn't recognize. "Hey, I came across your profile, and I think you have a really unique look. Are you interested in modeling work? I run a talent agency that specializes in new faces." I frowned. Modeling? Me? I wasn't ugly or anything, but I had never considered myself model material. Still, curiosity got the best of me. I clicked on the profile. The account looked legit. It had thousands of followers, professional-looking photos, and links to an agency website that seemed real enough. They even had testimonials from people who claimed they had gotten gigs through them. A part of me felt flattered. Maybe it was fake, but maybe it wasn't. So, against my better judgment, I responded. "Hey, I've never done any modeling before, but I'd love to hear more about what you're offering." The reply came immediately. "That's great. We're actually looking for fresh talent, and I think you'd be perfect. We're casting for a high-end fashion shoot, and I'd love to get you in for an interview." Something felt off. It was too fast, too eager. But before I could overthink it, another message popped up. "It's paid, of course. $1,000 per session. No experience needed. If you're interested, let's set up a time to chat." My hesitation wavered. $1,000? For one session? It sounded too good to be true. Because it was. I told Sam about it that afternoon. She raised an eyebrow. "Did you look them up?" "Yeah," I said. "They seem real." Sam frowned. "I don't know, something about it feels weird." I rolled my eyes. "You're being paranoid." But later that night, when I was alone in my room, I did another deep dive. I searched for the agency's name on Google. At first, everything seemed normal. The website, the testimonials, the social media presence. Then I found the forum post. A thread on an obscure model safety website. "Beware, fake agency luring girls into sex trafficking." My stomach dropped. I clicked on it, my heart pounding. Dozens of comments. Girls sharing the exact same experience. The same DMs. The same promises of high-paying gigs. And then, the horror stories. One girl talked about how she had actually gone to a meeting. She had been told to meet at a hotel. When she arrived, there was no camera crew, no agency rep, just two men waiting for her in a dimly lit room. She barely escaped. Some girls weren't as lucky. I felt sick. The messages I had received weren't just some scam. They were a trap. I blocked the account immediately. For weeks, I couldn't shake the unease. I felt like I had dodged a bullet without even realizing it. But then things got worse. Because a few months later, Sam introduced me to someone. And that's when I realized this wasn't over. It was a Saturday night, and we were at a bar when Sam suddenly lit up. "Oh, I almost forgot. I met someone who might have a job opportunity for you." I turned. A man was standing behind her. Tall, dressed in an expensive suit, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "This is Lucas," Sam said. "He's a business consultant. He said he's looking for an assistant, and I thought of you." Lucas extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you." Something about him made my skin crawl. I shook his hand out of politeness, but my gut was screaming at me. His grip was too tight. His eyes never left mine. "I actually just had a spot open up," he said smoothly. "The pay is excellent. You'd be traveling a lot, meeting some important people. If you're interested, we should talk." I froze. His voice, his words. It felt familiar. And then it hit me. He sounded exactly like the guy who DM'd me. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a coincidence. Sam didn't know it, but she had just introduced me to the same people who had tried to lure me in online. I forced a smile. "Thanks, but I actually just got a new job." Lucas didn't blink. "That's a shame." There was something in his tone. Something that told me he didn't believe me. Something that told me he already knew that wasn't true. I grabbed Sam's arm. "We should get going." She blinked. "But we just got here." Now, Lucas was still watching me, still smiling. We left, and I never saw him again. But later that night, as I was lying in bed, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have said yes. We'll be in touch." I changed my number, deleted my social media, made sure my address wasn't public anywhere online. To this day, I don't know how close I came to something terrible. But sometimes, when I'm out late at night, I get this feeling like someone is watching me, like someone is waiting. And I know that if I had made even one wrong choice, I might have never come home at all. There's something about 18th birthdays that feels different from the rest. They're supposed to mark the beginning of adulthood, the year you finally gain your freedom, the year everything changes. But for me, my 18th birthday wasn't about freedom. It was about fear. Because that night, I came horrifyingly close to disappearing forever. It started with a party. Not my party, a friend's birthday party at a house deep in the countryside, far away from town. One of those places where the nearest neighbor is a mile away, where the road leading up to the house is nothing but dirt and gravel. It was the kind of party where everyone showed up, even if they weren't invited. Loud music, alcohol, people spilling out onto the front lawn. It was chaotic, but it was fun. I was with my boyfriend, Nick, and a few of our friends. We had planned to stay for a couple of hours, then head home before it got too late. I should have stuck to that plan. Somewhere around midnight, I noticed him. A man I had never seen before. He was older, mid-30s, maybe even 40, but he didn't look like he was just some older brother picking up a sibling. He was alone, and he wasn't drinking. He was just watching. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was someone's uncle. Maybe he was the owner of the house, making sure nothing got out of control. But the longer the night went on, the more I noticed him. Every time I moved, his eyes followed me. If I went to grab a drink, he was nearby. If I stepped outside for air, he was there too. He never spoke, never danced, never interacted with anyone. Just watched me. A cold unease crept into my stomach. I leaned toward Nick. "Do you know that guy?" Nick glanced at him, frowning. "No clue." "Why?" "He keeps staring at me." Nick turned to look again, and just like that, the man suddenly looked away, as if he hadn't been watching at all. "Maybe he's just weird," Nick said. "Want me to say something?" I shook my head. "No. I just want to leave soon." Nick squeezed my hand. "Give me like 20 minutes, and we'll go, okay?" I nodded, but 20 minutes was too long. I went to use the bathroom. It was upstairs, at the end of a narrow, dimly lit hallway. By that point, the party was in full chaos mode, loud music, people drunkenly stumbling past me, voices blurring together. I reached the bathroom and shut the door behind me, locking it. I took a moment to breathe. Then, just as I was about to leave, something made me pause. A sound. A soft creak outside the door. Like someone was standing there. I froze. Was someone waiting for the bathroom? I hesitated, then slowly unlocked the door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty, but when I stepped out, I felt it. A presence. A wrongness. Then movement at the end of the hall. The man. He was standing just past the hallway entrance, partially hidden in the shadows. Just standing there. Waiting. I felt my entire body lock up. I turned and rushed back downstairs, heart pounding. I needed to find Nick. Now, I found him outside, talking to some friends. "We need to go," I blurted. Nick's smile faded. "What's wrong?" I glanced over my shoulder. The man was now standing on the porch, watching us. That guy, he was upstairs. I think he was waiting for me. Nick's expression darkened. He turned, making direct eye contact with the man. For a second, I thought Nick was going to march over there and confront him. But then, something happened that made my stomach drop. The man smiled. A slow, calm, almost knowing smile. Then he turned and walked away. Just like that. No rush. No panic. Like he wasn't afraid of being caught. Like he already knew he would see me again. Nick exhaled sharply. "Let's get the fuck out of here." We drove home in tense silence. By the time we got back to my house, I was exhausted. My nerves were fried, and all I wanted to do was crawl into bed. Nick walked me to my bedroom window. It faced the backyard, and he always checked it for me before leaving. It was just something he did. But that night, the moment he looked outside, his entire body went still. I frowned. "What?" He didn't speak, just stared. I stepped beside him, and my breath caught in my throat. Standing in the backyard, just beyond the porch light's reach, the man. He was there, watching. Nick moved first. He lunged for the door, yanking it open, stepping onto the porch. "HY," he shouted. The man didn't run. He just tilted his head, as if he were studying us. Then, finally, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. I slammed the door shut. "Lock everything," Nick said, his voice tight. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later. The man was gone. No footprints. No sign of him. Nothing. They asked me if I recognized him. I didn't. I told them about the party, how he had been watching me all night, how I caught him standing in the hallway outside the bathroom. The officers exchanged a look. Then one of them sighed and said, "You're not the first girl to report this." The man had been seen before. At parties, at bars, at clubs. He always watched young women. Sometimes he followed them home. But he had never actually broken in or physically harmed anyone, which meant there was nothing the police could do. They told me to be careful, to lock my doors, to call them if I saw him again. But that was it. I never saw him after that night. Not physically, at least. But sometimes, when I'm home alone, I get this feeling. Like someone is just beyond my sight, watching me. Like if I turned around fast enough, I'd see him standing in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. The worst part? I never found out who he was, or what he really wanted. All I know is that, on the night of my friend's birthday party, I almost became his.